As a young'un, barring some other anthropomorphic mascots, I practically grew up on Sonic the Hedgehog. On the desktop computer, on the Mega Drive, on the television, and loose, autistic reenactments with my cousin. Those were the days. My taste in the Blue Blurs world would persist throughout my school years, of course, and this was the mid-2000s we're talking about. Nearly every classroom had those bulky Windows XP monitors, and let me tell you, Sonic Flash games were a very common sight upon their screens. Surprisingly, I never played them that much. I was a weird kid. My attention was spent on fan wikis like Sonic WikiZone, then called Sonic News Network, Sonic Vegemite, and perhaps the most common site I would visit, the mystical Forest Zone. I was big into pixel art and sprite sheets in my younger years, still kind of am to an extent, and this bustling online hub scratched that specific Sonic-y itch. It's very nostalgic looking back. Shame we never got more of the Insomnia webcomic, and I hope Cajun and Damien and the lot are doing well since those days. But anyway, I was wowed by the creativity of sprite edits and original pixel art, and I was very familiar with the games most of these sprite sheets were ripped from. All these different poses were prime for webcomics and the like, with a funny or a more acquired taste. But I was intrigued at seeing the Chaotix here with wholly different designs. I had played Sonic Heroes at that point, so I knew how these three looked, yet here there was supposedly a game they had originally debuted in, with more detailed assets not seen in any of my Mega Drive library. And these unique sprites, in this funky little Sonic hub, found on frenzied Google searches during ICT lessons, was how I learned about this title. The forgotten Sonic game, Knuckles Chaotix. Chaotix, more widely known as Knuckles Chaotix on the US box art, is ostensibly the black sheep of the classic side of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Considered a popular mystique during the early years of the internet, housed within the game are elements the series would reference or further experiment with, but with a forceful reluctance to properly call back to it. That was Sega's opinions on it after it was a total commercial failure of a game, but the fans certainly remember it despite how little it sold, and has since become a collector's item for a long-gone era of Sonic. Poorly sold yet beloved in retrospect. Smells like a cult classic to me. What a way to treat the sole platformer with Knuckles' name on it, and it starred him and his own band of sidekicks. This was this gang's first canon appearance in the series, though before most of them would be refitted as a detective agency in Sonic Heroes onwards. This leaves them in quite a peculiar spot, and one I am fully willing to dissect. So stay comfortably seated, stay hydrated with water, stop listening to rap music Vector, and buckle up ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between. It's time to crack the curious case of Knuckles Chaotix. Contrary to popular belief, the main gang weren't called the Chaotix in their first appearance. Rather, it was a play on the chaotic, erratic gameplay and shenanigans they go through, with the X inserted in because it was exclusive to the 32X add-on. Originally imagined as a successor to Sonic 3 and Knuckles on the Sega Saturn, before Sega of America cut it back for being over-budgeted and taking too long, a year before the ragtag crew were metaphorically formed, the early build of what would be Knuckles' Chaotix would be Sonic Crackers, starring Sonic and Tails. Quite the title, and I like the screen they slapped together. Reminds me of the old online text guides peeps would make, though I hear it's actually a misspelling of clackers, named after the toys of which the main mechanic is based on. Called Sonic Stadium in the ROM header, a clear misspelling of Sonic Stadium, this was made to test out the eventual ring tether mechanic. Earlier on, it was intended to be like Sonic and Tails chained together after escaping Robotnik's prison, which, ooh, yeah, that's one way to torture them. And spoiler alert, the bound ring doesn't change very much from what we see here. Very experimental, perhaps a little too much so. Detailed in this prototype are tests of what would later be finalised in the finished release. Different colour palettes for stages, close to final versions of the game's soundtrack, a predominantly vertical map shape with 0 bottomless pits, and 2 zones that resemble the tower and roller coaster levels. Just make sure you complete them in less than a minute because, ugh, sorry Tails. There were also world map-like screens, and the duo have unique sprites when traversing these checkered fields. Yeah, Sonic Crackers was a whole thing. When this glorified engine test got leaked in the late 90s, nobody knew what to make of it. Was it an unreleased game? An April Fool's Day prank? The rumoured Sonic the Hedgehog 4? What's with the elastic band mechanic? Who's eating crackers? The thing is, this wasn't actually handled by Sonic Team, nor Sega's main branch. They were busy on Nights into Dreams and the Drift games respectively. This internal team were mainly peeps responsible for Sonic CD, so you know they had to give it the same level of flair. And for real, there's a lot of familiar faces. Kazuyuki Hoshino, Takeshi Thomas Yuda, Takumi Miyake, and several others from previous projects. It's clear that the crew granted this game its own visual identity alone through their collaboration. While Sonic Crackers was still in the works, it was decided production would move from the standard Sega Mega Drive to the 32X, an impressive add-on which was sadly rushed out so quickly in between it and the Sega Saturn's releases that it was a commercial and critical flop. But hey, at least you could play Doom on it. Wait, this isn't Doom. Before we continue, if you like all this Sonic tomfoolery, my videos on them, or like, I don't know, hearing my rambling on the subjects, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. Much obliged. It wouldn't be until later when Sonic and Tails were removed and promptly replaced with Knuckles the Echidna as the main character. This was less a marketing strategy for a Knuckles-centric spin-off and more because Sega of Japan didn't want to taint the Sonic brand with this potential failure on their hands. Joining Rad Red are his Chaotix, most having already existed at this point. They had Mighty the Armadillo, replacing Sonic because they didn't want the blue guy as a sidekick, hailing from the arcade game Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, which I haven't covered because... bro, how? Vector the Crocodile had been in concept art and calendars as a member of Sonic's unused rock band, and Charmy B had first appeared in a 1992 issue of the Shogakukan manga, where he had a wholly different vibe and appearance, the latter two having Naoto Oshima's blessing after he helped repurpose them into their new roles. Espio is a new character designed by Takumi Miyake, and his design certainly matches the aesthetic of the game. I honestly have a soft spot for his classic look with his dark irises and a permanent furrow brow. And speaking of designs, don't think I'm going to forget the box art for the different regions. These two, drawn by Greg Martin, has his interpretation of the game's zany, carnival-themed aesthetic, that is despite a couple of inconsistencies like the player characters literally connected by a rubber band. The Japanese cover doesn't tell much, simply having a headshot of each of the Chaotix, along with their team name just slapped there on its own, draped over a blank-white background. I suppose it's trying to be minimalist, like Sonic and Knuckles' covers, and failing, but that's just because I like the Western ones more. The game was released on April 1995, the 21st specifically in Japan, and June 23rd in Europe and the UK. Keep in mind that this was like half a year after the transition from Sonic Crackers, this into a playable, completable state. I do not envy the crunch the developers must have gone through. After the game was hastily released for the money sink that was the 32X, it had not seen any official re-releases outside of briefly popping onto the subscription service GameTap. More like GameSap. It was also initially supposed to feature in Sonic Gems collection alongside Sonic CD and Sonic the Fighters and the like, but their emulation of the 32X title proved to be too difficult to carry over, though artwork from the game is still featured in the museum. For my own footage, I myself had to resort to emulating the game, until Sega decides modern audiences can properly play it. And we're not done talking about early Sonic game vibes because, in the story, there is much to examine. So let's cover that and the levels you'll be running through. Yeah, similar to other Sonic games around the 90s, the setup of events are marginally different depending on the localization of the game's instruction booklet. The North American manual has the game take place on Carnival Island, where they seem to have mixed it up with Angel Island in saying that a power emerald powers its electricity and that Knuckles is the guardian of it and acts as the carnival's bouncer. What a curious change in profession. What's true across either localization is that Dr. Robotnik is up to no good, mucking about with combi catchers that have imprisoned Knuckles' friends. The way they can be freed is with the supposed ring power, and only through the power of teamwork can Knuckles hope to kick Dr. Robotnik and the returning Metal Sonic off of the island before tomorrow morning draws and the place is left in ruins. This is despite the fact that the time of day changes between zones, but I digress. The Japanese manual is a little more lengthy and dramatic. This island supposedly appeared out of nowhere, rising from the ocean after a tectonic movement of the planet was caused by the Master Emerald's pillar, which I assume is its altar. The pillar in question would make the landmass rapidly become a lush paradise of nature and greenery in a short amount of time. Knuckles is understandably puzzled by this, thinking that Angel Island and this new island might be mysteriously connected, or even have an ancient civilization and mysterious power stone of their own. However, before he can go and check it out, Dr. Eggman is already there making his own investigation. The mad scientist discovers magic rings, as well as giant rings that had a hand in the civilization's downfall. It's quite cryptic, especially when, due to some shenanigans, the island's power stone disappears and in its place lies a Chaos Ring, one of 6 uniquely coloured giant rings that essentially act as this game's collectible MacGuffins. What does it do? I have no clue, but Eggman believes it holds the key to not only understanding the rings Sonic's gang collect on a regular basis, but also using its connection to the Master Emeralds to literally pluck it from Knuckles' island. So Neutrochic High Zone, Eggman's theme park hideout, is quickly constructed, in record time too, though we know firsthand how fast his robot workforce is when he puts his mind to it. Knuckles soon arrives and enters the theme park, realising that Badniks once again impede his progress. Though this time they happen to be powered by Dark Rings, a crystallised energy from the Chaos Ring given form to make offshoots, which, once released from robots and vehicles, disintegrate into dust. Freeing the Chaotix members from their bizarre containment pods, it's up to the team to put a stop to him before Eggman uses the recently discovered power for world domination. Oh yeah, these dudes. Let's check them out real quick, while we're covering the main playable characters. Knuckles returns, much more level-headed than in his first appearance, and his colour palette has gone from red to more of a hot pink. He can still glide through the air and climb walls. Espio the Chameleon is a stern, single-minded fellow who is somewhat envious of Knuckles due to his important role as Guardian of Angel Island. Calm down, man, you're already unofficially getting top billing. Also, like the Echidna, he can climb walls and walk up and down them with ease, and can also somewhat hover through the air. Instead of rolling into a ball, he jumps with his axle spin, where he's like a spinning top. Mighty the Armadillo is a wandering traveller who ends up roped into this mess. In the lore, he's got the strength to take on the strongest of robots, but is actually quite chill. Though you wouldn't know in this game because his sprites just use Sonic's scowling mug as a template. In this game, he can wall jump pretty effectively, as long as you babysit your ring partner. I'll go into that later. Vector the Crocodile is just a dude who loves banging to his tunes. The unofficial leader of the gang, he's pretty strong and can dash in any direction once with a good shoulder tackle, or a power boost as the US manual calls it. Also love how when he jumps or spin dashes his whole body makes an O shape. He's a really flexible dude. According to early translations, he is a believer of religion and travelled here in search of God. Good for him, but I think she's on another island. I'm aware it's like a badly translated Blues Brothers quote that got misread. He can also climb walls like Knuckles, and my word is he proud of it. Charmy Bee, a little bee dude. While still talkative and fascinated by flowers like he would be in later iterations, here he's more mature and moody according to both manuals. He can also simply dash in any direction infinitely and hover instead of being limited to walking on the ground. I think I hadn't learned of this until halfway through my playthrough. Thanks Scruffy for telling me that. And the last two are, 2 members of the villain's mechanics group, Heavy and Bomb, 2 other possible ring partners. They supposedly rebelled against their creator, though it's speculated in the US manual that they're really just there to hinder the heroes. This is logical in that, while completely invincible, Heavy is a slow bugger who cannot jump for crap, and Bomb is light but cannot spin attack and will explode and make you lose rings if he happens to get hit. Jeez buddy, like that's my fault. There is also Amy Rose as an Easter egg in the groovy sound test menu who you can summon via a code in the colour test, and also an unused playable character whose name is simply the star symbol repeated 10 times. Though it resembles a garbled Knuckles sprite that will usually crash the game the moment he lands, he is meant to be Tails' leftover sprites, but instead he makes this thing. The ominous white echidna is commonly nicknamed Wechidna or Weknir by the hacking community. While not as well known as other Sonic palette glitches, such as Ashura and a visually garbled Tails, it's worth noting that the design would inspire Archie Sonic's Dr. Finitivus, as well as IDW's Dr. Starline, along with Searching Kitsune with the aforementioned 2. Going in 2 at a time, there are several different stages to speed through, or attractions as they are sometimes called due to the game's amusement park setting. The 5 all have a different themed aesthetic and have 5 acts each, called levels in this game, the last one being where Dr. Robotnik's mech is fought. Separated from them is the game's training zone, Isolated Island. Nothing can hurt you here, and it mainly exists for you to get a handle on the game's mechanics. There's 4 levels for the training mode, while in the main scenario there are 5. And I'll go more into the soundtrack in a later segment, but it should be noted that the music for this zone, Door into Summer, is like one of the best in the game, and it really gives a good first impression for the senses. Botanic Base is like a giant greenhouse filled with all sorts of bizarrely shaped plants. Even the enemies are mostly green and camouflaging among the flora. Speed Slider is perhaps the most theme parky of the stages, with long twisting roads resembling roller coaster tracks, perfect for the faster characters to run along. Marina Madness' stage simulates a harbour setting, with lots of flying boats and metal bridges and such. The music is really chill too, would probably be my favourite harbour-themed Sonic level if Metal Harbour didn't exist. Techno Tower has the most vertical level design of the stages. Considered the key attraction in Robotnik's Park, there seems to be more defences and obstacles here to look out for. Amazing Arena is the last one on the list. A colourful toy factory lets you actually need to find the clock in the stage to activate before you can continue, or else it won't count if you complete it and you'll get kicked out. Also might be connected to that clock, which stands in the world entrance, the main hub, and a small area where you are dropped off in between attractions. Stages you go through are picked at random for no reason other than for the sake of fun. I don't know why they made it. It makes sense considering it was built by a mad scientist, but it's still pretty odd game design. After Knuckles and the Chaotix have defeated each of Dr. Robotnik's mechs, powered by medium-sized dark rings, the gang think they've won, but once they return to the main hub, the level select area reveals its true purpose: to ambush the good guys with Metal Sonic at its core. Oh right, I forgot Metal Sonic was here. Rebuilt from his last scuffle with Dark Ring power, in between the intro and now, you only see him when he flies in and out of nowhere after no buttons are pressed for exactly 1 minute, unleashing either a charge move or the Plasma Pulse attack where he shoots a laser from his chest. Following his defeat in the deadly comfy chair, he returns to Robotnik, who proceeds to use his last Dark Ring offshoots to power him up. This is Metal Sonic Kai, a monstrous red version of Metal Sonic which is as massive and deadly with its mechanical snarling face as it is slow and lumbering like a giant cardboard cutout. During the early years of the fandom, it was assumed that this form was a mech built around Metal Sonic, piloted by Dr. Robotnik. Another quick fact, Metal's regular form in this game is referred to as Metal Sonic Kai in the Japanese manual, as he was an entirely rebuilt model, and was only attributed to the giant red form afterwards by the West alongside the fan nickname Mega Metal Sonic, before Sega would settle on it becoming the transformation's canon name. After multiple phases, parts of Metal are gradually broken off, and the mechanical behemoth is destroyed. The ending depends on if you collected all the Chaos Rings or not. An unsuccessful attempt leading to a scene where all the Dark Rings disappear except one, meaning Robotnik still got it in his possession, and a credit sequence with hellish music playing as a repaired Metal Sonic Kai looms over a burning cityscape. I suppose Robotnik burns the place down after he's done with it. That's all Metal went insane. In the good ending, the game is like, whoa, cool, and the credits roll over the Chaotix, Knuckles, and Sonic and Tails posing like on the title screen. A bit of a basic ending for all the effort made to achieve it, but at least the music's nice. A little late to the party, you guys. As expected when running on an add-on like the 32X, the game's graphics, in my view, are truly souped up and act as a bridge between the Mega Drive and the Sega Saturn. It undeniably takes advantage of the hardware, granting slight grace to the simple things like recurring item boxes having their icon flip about instead of just rising, destructible platforms literally disintegrating like sand below your feet, and just the game's 32,000 plus colour palette. Sprites contort, grow in size to demonstrate being in the foreground. The background utilises a more brilliant parallax scrolling effect than what could be achieved on the Mega Drive, and wow, check that funky chameleon out. Background objects and tile sets are full of neon brightness and personality. A bit too much visual stimulation, one might say, but thankfully they usually stick to set palettes so you can gauge what's a reachable platform or not. The backgrounds in particular are rich in colour and are just beautiful to gaze out at to admire the pixel art, especially the animated backdrops in some levels. Every platforming area has multiple colour palettes which shift through the different times of day. These are evidenced by the clock in the world entrance, which changes the time of day in all zones every 2 ticks when returning to the hub. The colour of the sky and tile sets don't affect gameplay, really just giving you another way to visually experience the levels, though it does open or close some accessible doorways at certain times of day, making bosses change attack patterns slightly, or the sub-boss in Amazing Arena taking less or more hits. Another notable thing I rather enjoyed is the introduction cutscenes before Dr. Robotnik encounters at the end of a zone's 5th level, giving us a little snippet of what to expect. Whether it's a bird's eye view of the patch of land launching into the sky like a rocket, or like just him entering with the explosive white flash of his latest mech. And structurally, they're hit or miss, really, though I do appreciate how most of them incorporate a theme park aesthetic onto their mechanics. They are entirely unnamed, but each have their own distinct boss theme. And where else are you going to see a screen projector styled mech, or Robotnik using the power of the primitive 3D diamonds that fold out and turn into shards that proceed to levitate around him? The usual monitors and rings make a reappearance, the former resembling their look since the first game, but coming with some new features. Shields now have a spinning animation when they are active and are given to whichever character pops the item box. Swap monitors will temporarily make you play as your partner character. Grow or shrink monitors are exactly what it says on the tin. Change monitors are a roulette that turns you into the character whose face is on it when you crack it open. Combine ring monitors allow you to store all your ring count in larger ones when you happen to collide with an obstacle. There are a couple only seen in bonus stages that affect elements of the world entrance. They will slow down the combi catcher and the level select roulette respectively. And there are unused extra time monitors in the game's files that come in normal and jonky. Springs on the ground also activate if you walk into them for some reason, and blue ones send you into fricking space. Also worth noting that the game ditches the live system, a first for the series. Yeah, before Sonic Lost World did it. Whenever you happen to get knocked out after losing all your protective rings and your partner character, instead of falling out of the world in a cartoonish fashion, a warp sequence awkwardly drops in behind you, and shortly after you land back in the game's hub. There is also autosave enabled in this game, and you have plenty of individual save files, really flaunting those engine capabilities. If I could picture one recurring visual theme throughout Knuckles Chaotix, it would be rings. Apart from the usual gameplay elements, you have the bound rings the playable characters hold, the knockoff rings that power robots and boss machines, and the colourful ring collectibles integrated in the game's lore, which I suppose is a good segue to the special stages. Like in Sonic 3, there are two types, the bonus stages and special stages, both familiar yet extremely abstract in this title. The non-Chaos Emerald bonus ones are found in giant rings hidden throughout the various levels. Remember the special stages from Sonic 1 where you bonked into walls to get to the end? Well, this is like if there were nary any walls or an end. You lose rings by the second, but you can steer yourself into rings and blocks that contain before-mentioned item boxes, ones that give points, affects the speed of which you fall, chompy ones that can make you lose rings, regular-ass blocks, springs, and ones that boot you from the area with your current total of rings. They are a real money eater, these bonus stages, so I often avoid them to keep my ring count. Special stages. Now, these are both really cool and really cumbersome, both at the same time. To get to them, you need to pass by the gold plate with 50 or more rings in hand, and jump into the giant ring that appears above. They truly push the engine past the limits of what could be done visually. It's really quite impressive how they got proper 3-dimensional roadways which let you run up the walls and ceiling. Like with some item boxes, your partner can also collide with the giant ring, letting you play as them instead even if you didn't intend to. Heavy, goddamn you, get back here! While pretty impressive and fun to play at first, they certainly aren't for the faint of heart, and it is pretty disorientating with how the camera is fixed right behind you. Going up and down polygonal slopes is bound to cause motion sickness in some. And the last ones are really... screw them. The 6 Chaos Rings are found at the end of each course, working like in Sonic 2 and CD where you have to complete the courses in order to get to the next one. Unfortunately, they do not grant any super states when you collect them all, but they do change the ending screen. Then again, the time stones in Sonic CD didn't either, but I remember that didn't stop artists from making their own interpretations of what that form would look like. Where was I? If you enter a special stage after having already gotten all the Chaos Rings, you will instead be transported to wireframe versions of the maps, which are entirely optional and only award you more points. They are notably harder to maneuver in, what with the floor often looking the same as gaps in the road, and when I first saw them I assumed there had been a graphical bug. Maybe this is where the wireframe fighters live. Now for the thing that makes or breaks the game, the teamwork mechanic. It's been called a fun quirk, annoying as hell to deal with, an innovation in platforming, and the worst thing about the game. And I agree with all of these points. Clearly, the team had been experimenting on branching out from the traditional Sonic gameplay, and I suppose they needed a way for the second player to join in on the fun without being, like, off-screened every few seconds by player 1. But, at least with a computer player, which I imagine a large majority of players did, the bound ring is not a good selling point at all. It's so gimmicky. I can't tell you how many times I had trouble doing simple platforming because the character AI had a mind of its own, making me awkwardly motion them to follow along so I could get moving, and springs launching both of us around each other and all together going nowhere. It's doubly annoying if you happen to have one of the substitute partner characters, and more often than not I would just carry them all the way. It is curious that the game gives you like a hefty number of lessons to get you used to the bloody thing. I will say, while extremely cumbersome, when mastered it can be surprisingly fun to muck around with. You have a button to hold down to keep your partner character in place, and with that you can do a couple of moves that make level traversal erratically enjoyable. However, unlike with having Tails as a follower, your player character is not invincible, and if they happen to get hit by a hazard or enemy, they will drop a single ring. It's not much of a problem, unless you happen to be somewhere with no rings and the dude just drops out like he had left the oven on. You can also call your other dude to your side with a button if they get stuck, costing you 10 rings. This will make your ring count in the negatives if you're not careful, giving you less points when you reach the end of the stage. You can also toss your partner in like all 8 directions to reach higher platforms or throw at boss enemies, which is rarely used but is one of your main methods of attack. There are some glitches where you can eliminate them for a level and play the game like normal, but it's silly that you have to go through these hoops just to have a traditionally fun Sonic experience. While remarkably difficult and infuriating at times, I can't help but feel like they're a pair of doofuses stumbling their way into Robotnik's deadly theme park and succeeding, which, when you think about it, is exactly how the Chaotix would operate. The glorified elastic band isn't my only issue with the game, however. For one thing, as well as your two characters moving generally slower together, the game too is slow in areas where it wasn't before. At the start of levels, there has to be this sequence where your characters sluggishly drop in amid an admittedly impressive zone title screen. Stepping on areas that transport you to a different part of the map are quite literally pace breakers, whether it's lifts or floating flying saucers. Man, maybe that's where Ken Penders got the Dark Legion saucer idea from, but I'll go more into comics later. I also wish they spent more time developing the stages to make them differentiate from one another. With 5 entire levels, the environments can be very copy-paste and lack variety in hazards and level gimmicks. I also wish the Chaotix had their own victory poses like characters did in Sonic 3. Instead, they just go into their regular idle animations as if they don't want to be affiliated with one another. But man, what's that I hear in the hub? There's like the sound of music. Well, may as well throw the game this bone. Ironically, while most aspects are an improvement when compared to the previous non-32X games, I'd say the music is pretty standard. Not to say it's bad or anything, just the instrument variety is limited and lackluster, and not as impressive as in previous titles. A lot of repetitive drum and snare sounds are present, for example, which was one of my minor nags for the first 2 Sonic games with their toy drum instrument dominating the soundtrack. Nonetheless, there is some clear talent involved in Knuckles' K-OST. Not counting some music in Sonic CD, the OST used in this game all have names now instead of just being named after the location they're in. They honestly didn't even need to, and I think that's just cool. Jonko Seratsu and Mariko Namba, semi-regular sound composers in the series, were the ones behind this soundtrack, and for all it's worth, there are a couple of legit impressive, wondrous tracks. I've already gushed about Door into Summer, but while the tempos can be a little repetitive, you will be hearing repeated tunes for 5 levels straight, there are some other tracks that have a decent rhythm in the middle. And speaking of levels, how about I cover the little robots that you see in them? Yep, it's the last game aspect to cover. Since they do have most of the same art team as Sonic CD, their designs too were translated from 3D models before turning into 2D sprites. They are quite a colourful bunch. Badniks are also remarkably unremarkable in their attack patterns. You'll see a lot of them have no means of attacking you and just waddle or float left and right constantly. It's one of the reasons this game is so easy. And there was also an unused and unnamed robot enemy in the game for the amazing arena attraction, which also would have presumably walked back and forth. Unused Badnik notwithstanding, I'll happily go over them all in my bestiary. Lift-Door is a Badnik seen in a couple of tutorial levels. They cannot hurt you and act more like platforms than actual enemies, and they don't drop a Dark Ring on defeat. Ambush are floating bushes that protrude and retract their spikes. Their presence is known by the leaves they drop from above. Bush Bubbles are a light bulb plant hybrid that move back and forth. Sometimes on certain times of day, specific ones will be faster and have a harmful electric current around them. Spike Towers possess a giant harpoon on their back, which they use to reach the ceiling and lift themselves up before going back down. They can't swing very far despite this. Booms look a little like palm trees, but are actually pappus you see on dandelions. If you try to attack them, they will capture you and self-destruct immediately. Catalurcher is a variant of the Caterkiller Badniks, despite being based on inchworms. They're a bit of a downgrade because they have no protective spikes. Needlenose, a new name for the Mosky, is the only clearly returning Badnik design. They are actually somewhat upgraded, as when plunging their nose into the ground, they will release 2 damaging projectiles. The Hoverbee Mark II is a variant of the Patapata Badniks from Sonic CD, just with a different means of flight and a different pattern in which it floats. Would later be renamed to just Hoverbee. Dribblers will always bounce 2 small bumpers off of the ground, which will knock you back if you hit them. Gotcha is a type of Badnik that appears very suddenly in the foreground, before they come in and contain you within a force field. They will suck up your ring count until dealt with by a partner character. Pop tanks roll around on tank treads and can also be found on walls or ceilings. Piranhas, despite being fish, act more like the buzz bombers and soar back and forth in the air. They occasionally cough up an explosive projectile down at you. Flotsam is a manta ray Badnik which only really soars through the air in one direction. Marina Madness Badnik 1, currently unnamed, also flies through the air, usually in the opposite direction of the rays. Marina Madness Badnik 2 resembles a submarine and rises out of the ground when approaching their periscopes, after which they will slowly charge forward. Trundolls are like the easiest to defeat. They speed back and forth and stop to a halt if you're near. Bombearers, they're grey containers. When destroyed, their cargo will hit the floor and scatter forth harmful explosives. Gutbuster is a goofy chef bin robot which waddles back and forth, stopping only to belch out a bomb which lands back into its mouth. Ringleaders are uniformed toy soldiers which can levitate and send their propeller half around like a boomerang. Blitz are stationary turrets that lock onto your location, and then a barrage of homing missiles are sent your way. TikTok is the name of clock Badniks, armed with swinging pendulum bobs with spikes. Probably one of my favourite enemy designs. Motor spikes are plant-like robots that hover about aimlessly in the air. Their spikes are made of rubber. Beetle is the name of a robot which slowly rolls back and forth, swatting with a spiked club. Triclods, based on camera tripods. These Badniks are stationary but are also seen running back and forth. And lastly, an unnamed sub-boss confronted in amazing arena levels. Resembling Dr. Robotnik, their heads float about and they attack with detachable arms. You'll get a reward of collectible rings if you defeat it fast enough. And with my thoughts on the game itself passed by us like a swinging goalpost, let's finish this off with the legacy of Knuckles Chaotix and its small number of adaptations during the late 90s. Regardless of how little it sold, back in the day, online there were lots of talk about this elusive video game with wonky gameplay. Images and stories would be shared about on forums, and many compared its visuals and aesthetic to Sonic CD, which Knuckles Chaotix is practically a spiritual successor to. In fandom circles, there would be a ROM hack made to replace Mighty the Armadillo with Sonic, and like previously mentioned, the Chaotix Sans Mighty would be reimagined and reintroduced with altered designs in Sonic Heroes less than a decade later. Funnily enough, that game also has a teamwork mechanic, similarly bright and tunnel-like special stages, and a monstrous Metasonic form at the end as the final boss. Sega would flip-flop between considering this game canon to the franchise, or being entirely disconnected, what with it having classic versions of the Chaotix that don't really mesh well with the rest of their appearances, though it has since been acknowledged as having occurred, according to TalesTube. The Chaotix and the events of their game were also fairly common in the comic book scene. I believe the first was British Fleetway's Sonic the Comic publications, where the Chaotix, with Knuckles' role placed with Knack the Weasel, were guardians of a pocket dimension as instructed by the Omni viewer. Worth noting that Knack was said to live in the special zone according to the Japanese manual of Sonic Triple Trouble, so I suppose that's where they got that idea. Knack in this continuity would betray the Chaotix to side with the Brotherhood of Metallics, basically a million copies of Metal Sonic, which is ruled over by the giant red Emperor Metallics, which bears quite a resemblance to Metal Sonic Kai. The Chaotix dudes would assist Sonic in some issues, but would mainly go up against their own bizarre foes in side stories. That same year, Archie Comics would take a crack at incorporating Knuckles' Chaotix elements, starting with its own Sonic special issue. The theme park, now being on Angel Island, had its own justification for existing, though it's still Robotnik behind the whole thing, and Knuckles kind of stumbles into each of the Chaotix one after the other following Sonic and the gang getting captured. It's clearly rushed, and during this era there was not much in terms of story except for being a loose version of the game's events, but in a corny and admittedly fun comic book form. Mighty literally introduces himself by blasting through a wall, and then they're all like, hey, we're a team now, I guess. Let's go vandalize a theme park. Heavy and Bomb had new designs that allowed them to emote better, and were powered by power gems to give them free will. Later in the book, on 2 separate occasions, they were rebuilt to resemble their game selves more. Metal Sonic, at the time called Mecha Sonic, also had one of those power gems towards the end, and he even transformed into the Metal Sonic Kai form. This actually isn't the last time we'd see this form. One later dubbed Titan Metal Sonic was an entirely independent robot that was dropped to cover Eggman's escape, and post-reboot it would have gone more into the original Red Giant with its broken remains, but the series ended up cancelled, so no nice things for you. Also noteworthy is that post-reboot they had the ring bands make an appearance every now and then, which were perhaps the most inaccurate adaptation because they look stable here, and not having the characters bob and swing about like a ball and chain. So far, as of 2025, there hasn't been many allusions to Knuckles' Chaotix in IDW Sonic Comics, though the remains of Neutrodic High Zone were shown as a temporary hideout for Eggman in the second issue of the Fang the Hunter miniseries, now in a state of disrepair and flooding. Seems relevant in how the game gets overlooked by Sega, really. Despite easily being one of the hardest Sonic games to track down, Knuckles' Chaotix isn't satisfying a game to play nowadays. It sure was interesting properly playing Knuckles' solo debut after all these years. It's like uncovering a lost gem at the beach, but its value is lessened by the pointy bits dotted around it. The game was fun to play as a showcase on what the Mega Drive games could look like, but on like steroids, but finicky platforming mechanics and other glaring issues sadly plague the entire experience. With more time and letting the production team adjust to the engine, they probably could have corrected some bugs or made it less infuriating instead of adding a call button as a quick fix. And I'm not the only guy who thinks that. The great Clement famously started his walkthrough on the game in positive spirits, but the repetitive gameplay, lack of control in both the characters and the level select roulette, and the lack of any real challenge quickly soured his commentary. In my eyes, Knuckles' Chaotix is visually stimulating and worth remembering as the debut of several important mainstay characters, just with an unrefined gameplay style and sparse stages. Truly, it was too ambitious for its own good. If I were to rate it, comparing it to the other platforming Sonic games, it would be lower on the list. A D rank should suffice. It's an innovation indeed, but it probably needed more time to cook. Thank you for checking out this video on the elusive Sonic game, first seen in hazy recollections of my past. I always appreciate it when peeps watch my retrospectives and let me know of their own impressions of the game. Like, some of you guys legit buying this game when they first came out in the 90s is beyond fascinating to me, and I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts and experiences in the comments. In the next video, we're not returning to the blue hedgehog just yet, as we're shifting our focus to Tails, the lovable fox boy. Tails Sky Patrol and Tails Adventure are up next. Whether they be individual videos or one big one, I'll get back to you on that. But either way, it'll be more 8-bit goodness to dissect. Thank you ever so much for watching, if indeed you still are, and I will see you in the next video. Sonic Crack